A little bit about myself before we even start. I've been teaching for 8 years now at NYU Shanghai at the Interactive Media Arts program. And some of the classes are designed by me, thinking about introduction to robotics, but also how bio-inspired robot systems could really change the way that we consider robotics. And I'm sharing the slides with the host, where I include some of the links of my work and my research. The latest work I'm doing is in collaboration with Microsoft for accessible human-computer interaction. And without further ado, I think that if we are going to be spending some time together talking about robots, the first thing that we should do is to define what is a robot. So instead of diving in directly, I will go around, and I do this because I am an electronics engineer. I am a specialist in software, but at the same time, I also have a master in fine arts, and I think that there's a lot for us to think critically, to see the side of what happens when we really understand a topic. So I'm including this short video, a figurine that is not exactly a robot. Nobody, by the time that this was built, would have been using the word robot, but it's a figurine that it works like a clock. It's a clockwork mechanism that you wind up, and it moves its mouth, it moves its feet, it moves its hand, it nods the head. So there's a very important question here, that is, 500 years ago, some monk dedicated a lot of time to polish brass, right? Because you wouldn't go and buy it, make the gears, craft these ceramic elements, all to make a machine look like a human, with functions, with attributes that humans have. And this is 500 years ago. We have proof of this. We also know that the word robot itself is a new word. The first time that it was used was in 1921, when Play used an element that is something that we could also almost define like a zombie, where there was a human-like actor in the play, in the theater, manufacturing things, building things for others. And instead of calling them zombies or calling them slaves, they're calling them robota. This the word robots was later picked up by other science fiction writers, and a lot happened. But I think I'm making a point here. 500 years ago, we didn't know what were these things, but we're already imagining them. I will even go much earlier. But if the first time that we were using the word was in 19 something, this is something really, really new. And there is a mysticism about what we imagine, and a very different approach from the pragmatism of the implementation. So in general, we are faced with this idea that robots are made with software, with electronics, with some mechanical elements. But is that true? Is a robot composed by those? So I think we should think a little bit about this. And if we go to Wikipedia, that is one of the sources where there's a lot of collective edition of the definitions, it says something like this. A robot is a mechanical or virtual artificial agent, usually an electromechanical machine that is guided by a computer program and electronic circuitry. But I think that we'll be missing the point if we only read this definition. An expert in this field starts thinking about where are the motors, and if the motor is in these three places, I will consider that this is a robot because it has at least 1, 2, 3 degrees of freedom or axis of motion. And it needs also to have an attached tool, very much thinking in a hand, and with the ability to perform actions that can be reprogrammed. It's an element that is happening right now, that science fiction today is catching these myths and legends that have existed for very long, and we see them as new. And people sometimes feel threatened, like, oh, the robots are going to come and catch me. But I'm putting here in the slide one figurine, stone made, inspiring the legend of the Hebrew golem. The Hebrews had this idea that a rock sent by God could obey the word of the chieftain and protect the village. But if you didn't follow certain laws, then this thing that was meant to be able to defend you from the enemies could actually become evil, and instead of being defending you from others, trying to defend you from you, and then this could become very dangerous. And on the right, I put a classic movie of a robot that has a humanoid shape. They are represented by Schwarzenegger, that has the shotgun, like, oh, protecting the boy. But it's really the same story, right? So we're talking about 2,000 years ago with the hero legend of the golem, and very up-to-date Skynet system that manufacture a robot that looks like humans to protect humans from humans. And these ideas leave us a little bit like in a limbo. How do we consider all these things together? So maybe there's a definition that we can use during these minutes that we share together, that robots are entities that are able to act and sense on the environment. So they will be able to perform actions. They will be able to also sense, use some method of adapt themselves, and they will be able to think. This word, I'm throwing it out there, but to define what is thinking is also to define what is intelligence, as it is not so simple. We don't have very good solutions to the problem of a definition of intelligence. But we kind of guess that a device like this, being a driverless car that is going to go very fast and have many sensors outside, going to move the wheels, it has to think in order to plan the path that it's going to go through. And something like this is not a robot. So when somebody is talking about a driverless car, we say, yeah, this is a robot, yes. And when somebody talks about a toaster, the toaster moves, the toaster has sensors, but the toaster doesn't think. So we say, no, toasters are not robots. A little bit like drawing this line on the sand about where do we want to focus our attention. And there are 3 words have been changing the paradigm of robotics, and in particular has been affecting a lot the factories, the manufacturing. So one of these words is like on the mouth of everybody, and it has to do with artificial intelligence. The idea that we are able to define a general artificial intelligence is a little bit too ambitious, but I did select something here that is at least one of the algorithms that is very, very simple. My students use it all the time. I said, really changing the way that we can conceptualize that a robot can be programmed to do things that exceed our own capabilities. So in the short clips that you're seeing now, you're seeing how a machine has been trained, in this case, to identify a little puppy or a music style, or with computer vision, the position of the body. And it's really, really simple. So I leave the link there. I think that is like super fun to try. And there's so many places that it can be taught, something that would be very difficult for us to program, that suddenly this changes the paradigm. I'm talking about digital machine because it's an easy example for me to bring to the table. But when people talk about artificial intelligence as like the big thing, in general, they're talking about a mixture of computer vision, deep learning, reinforced learning. So with something like this, that I'm encouraging you to experiment, you click, 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 and you teach the machine something that then the machine will be able to recognize, that will be able to understand. And this is not a minor trait. And the other thing that is very up to date is that we have things like this, like say like we are used to have technology that is trying to emulate the way we think. So I invite anybody to try the beta version of OpenAI. All scholars around the world are talking about this, till which extent humans are so unique. So you will see that you can even chat with it, and you will see that this really changes the way that we think. We can program a set of tasks. The monk at the beginning of my talk was just moving the hand, the mouth. But what happens if suddenly we have other set of tools? And another word, because I said I will talk about three different words. Another word is IoT, the Internet of Things, with the idea that everything is connected with everything. And this used to be almost like a fantasy, or like something that we were like, well, scientists around the world think, oh, what if we put more than 2 computers together? What if we put more than 4 computers together? So right now I'm showing images. This is the 5th anniversary of the robotic operating system. It's, I would say, the most advanced system of programming robots. And it's using something that is decentralized. It doesn't use a concept that is very an old architecture. It's very dynamic because every part of the robot can be addressed as a messenger, and they're all listening to each other, and that is really a game changer. We haven't seen some of the results. We'll show some of the applications later, but the idea that we will be able to be sending little packages of information from one place to the other is very revolutionary. I selected an image here because we are used to have internet with certain numbers and configurations, so we don't know too much about this. But the newer version of the protocol of internet for connecting things has an address, has a number. Now, the amount of devices that we could connect together with this protocol is equal to the amount of grains of sand on the surface of the earth. So that means that we could potentially connect everything with everything. This is not something that we were thinking about when we have the first robots. So this idea that we have artificial intelligence, IoT, comes together at the moment that also we have been struggling a lot to define control. This historical is very important, but I think that instead of like getting into a very theoretical conversation about cybernetics, I can show some images that are at the core of the development of robotics. These images are from a competition, it's a challenge organized by the DARPA in US. And all scientists around the world go with the robots. And it's very challenging to program a robot that can drive a car, get down from the car, because getting down from the car is so different. Climb some stairs, grab a power tool. I think it has to dig a hole, then pass the hand through that hole and act on a valve. And the result is quite hilarious, I think. So when we think about this, the robots are changing everything. And now the robots are also changing something like manufacturing methods. AI, IoT, a new method of control is really changing the way we see the world. How are the applications of this? So I selected a couple of things for us to have, right, a little bit the landscape. Hey, what is happening today? So this is just a warehouse, right? It's I think that the pronunciation probably is not great, but Sanyao, right? So you don't see people there, right? There are all these robots that each of them have an address, and they are all connecting with each other, and we will be able to see some of the ways that this has been like really changing one after the other, like small incremental changes. But this is something that's happening today that before we were not able to have mechanisms of control that could act so quickly. But now the designing methods for the robots are also using AI. And the way that the devices interact with the environment are not only going through a cable in a centralized model. Everything connects with everything. So this is totally crazy because it's going so fast that it's very difficult for me even to keep the pace of development. Now, I'm not talking about some science fiction thing only. I do talk about science fiction, but that's not only. But this is a video that's not so new. It's like already 10 years old, of how a Tesla car is manufactured. These kind of gigafactories are more and more common. Raw materials come in. There's some people working in the factory. It's not like it doesn't have anybody. But you seldom see human beings. The reason is that this is very efficient. It's also very pleasant for me when I was working in manufacturing. This is very noisy. It's an environment that I'm very glad to see robots there. But the changes that we have seen are like completely taking the human intervention and it's optimizing the productivity to levels that we were not thinking before. Now we are using deep learning to forecast when the robots are going to need maintenance. So we are getting to a level that really is changing the way we see the impact is increasing, and it's difficult to imagine where is it going to stop. There are some constraints. There are some places we see a lot of problems, but this kind of warehouse that I'm showing now on the slides is like a lot of robots. They're all working at unison by a system that it has at some place centralized control. Nevertheless, each of the units have to be independent. Otherwise, imagine all these shelves moving and crashing with each other. So I'm thinking that more and more for us it's important to be aware of what are our paradigms. How do we think of a robot as, or is this human thing, human-like thing? And what you're seeing right now, like for implementation that we have today, is really a game changer. Right? Kiva Robotics is the one that implemented in Amazon the warehouses, and it really changed the way that we see other warehouses implementing their models. But let me show you a little bit what we are seeing and is seeing right now. This is a robot that self-balances and identifies with computer vision where to go, and it's not centrally controlled. So today this is just an experiment, right? This is something not that new, the newer things happening. I'll show you a couple of them, but we see how these new technologies are really allowing us to explore newer ways to reimagine the factories. And one of the difficulties that we have with robots in general is that when we talk about it's a robot that has a tool, well, is a tool adaptable? And then when we think about tools, hands, I'm sorry, but they are the best tools. And bipeds are able to go through very difficult terrains. So the idea that robots will have wheels has been coming and going, and perhaps now we are getting to a moment where we think that robots walking is not going to be a problem. It's not going to be one of the things that we say, well, it could be done, but it's too expensive. So this, of course, is a fancy demo. I can imagine the amount of times that they launch it in order to get the robots not to fall even once. Nevertheless, we are getting there. I'm seeing a series of changes that's like really radical in the industry. And we go on, we see the incremental changes where China is one of the biggest manufacturers of robot systems for industrialization today. And that's not going to stop. I really don't think that's the case. It's really going to be more and more radical. And we see the impact of certain discoveries that happened in the last years. One of them is the way that we have been understanding nature as one of the influences on design for robots. And Robert Full has great work because he has been able to cross disciplines from biology, working with choreographers, with dancers, to understand better the body. And he goes to his kind of like conclusions from his experiments. I will show some of the experiments in a second, but it's like distribute control, use hybrid solutions, and don't try to mimic nature, but like just like be inspired by biology. So Robert Foote is like incredible because he goes and he studies roaches, he studies spiders, and then he goes and uses some of those knowledges to build robots. And he's not the only one. I think that at some point we are starting to see that many of the places that we have great innovation have been with leaders that they went one step ahead. They say, okay, I lost my legs, but I enjoy climbing. For example, Hugh Herr in the biomechanics program at MIT is one of the leaders, and we are seeing how the discoveries that he's doing are influencing many other aspects. So his story is very inspiring because he lost his legs and he wanted to continue climbing, and he did prototype after prototype. He didn't stop, and he was able to bring this to many others. Now, the influence of this into robotics it's a little bit like tangent. When are we going to use this model, to affect the industry? Well, definitely yes. It is the reason. It is the reason that we are able now to build things that are unthinkable before. So I'm showing right now a figure like of a dancer because she's dancing with a robotic leg. So this prosthetic is not only lightweight but responds super well to adapt the movements, and it has been designed also with AI. So the idea that we have all these great technologies and that they are able for us to give us one step forward in how we think about the way we manufacture, the way our supply chains are. It's really changing, and the robots are changing. Here we have something that is happening today, and you know this already. I bet that you have seen either from Alibaba or any of the other competitors. Even if you have been at a hotel, or last time I've been in Hai Di Lao in a hot pot place, there's a robot waiter. So these kind of things, we start to see them. I think many of them are also fuzz. But anyways, I think that there's a huge space for us to be there and say, well, okay, everything is done. And there is a professor that when I was chatting about this, he was telling me, well, we will not need people to design robots anymore. The robots will design robots. The AI algorithms is going to take over once we achieve a level that there's no more human intervention. We don't really have space for humans there. Nevertheless, I think that we can circle back and think a little bit about how do these machines are moving, how are they thinking, how do we connect all these dots together. And it's full of opportunities. So I included there a small graphic with what is mechatronics at the center, thinking that it's mechanical systems, it incorporates electronics, it incorporates computer science, and it also has control systems. It's full of opportunities. So it would be great to see more and more changes in the upcoming years. And I think that there's a little bit of thinking of where is this going, but it's a story that we should all build together. I want to play a short video clip of something I saw last week. A colleague sent it to me. I was like, wow, okay, it is happening. It's definitely happening. So what we're seeing now is one of the robots that it was designed by the same company that designed that humanoid and the handle, the Boston Dynamics. And what is about to happen is extremely surprising because the robots are able to align themselves so well, seeing each other, but then a little bit with the idea that they will be able to communicate with each other so well. It's a little bit of a fake, right? Everything is half pre-programmed and half remote control. Nevertheless, we're getting there. It will be very exciting to see some of you building new applications. So, well, anyways, thank you for having me, and yeah, happy holidays.